I used to think grief brought families together, that when someone you love dies, the pain reminds everyone what really matters. But I learned the hard way that for some people, pain is just another weapon. My mother and I have never been close. Calling her difficult would be polite. Unstable is closer to the truth. She was the kind of woman who could be laughing one minute and screaming the next, the kind who destroys something precious just to feel like she was in control again. When I was little, I didn't understand it. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. As I got older, I realized she was broken in ways I couldn't fix. She cut off her parents when I was about 10 years old, over something small. I don't even remember what it was. Maybe it was an argument about money or pride, or nothing at all. She didn't speak to them for a decade. Not one visit. Not one phone call. Not even a Christmas card. So I grew up with my grandparents instead. They raised me, fed me, and loved me in ways she never could. They weren't perfect, but they were stable, kind, predictable. I became their helper, their support. When I got my first job, I gave them part of my paycheck. When they got sick, I drove them to doctor's appointments. They didn't have anyone else, and I didn't mind being their someone. Then, in the winter of 2019, everything changed. My grandfather's kidneys started to fail. He was tired all the time, barely eating, barely awake. But even when he could hardly speak, he kept saying one thing over and over, "I want to see your mother." It broke my heart. 10 years of silence, and all he wanted in his last weeks was to see her face again. I called her. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Finally, I called her work. I told her she had to come, that he didn't have much time left. I guess she heard something different in my voice that day, maybe desperation, maybe anger, because for the first time in 10 years, she actually showed up. She stood in the doorway of his room, like she didn't belong there. He reached for her hand, tears in his eyes. I'll never forget that moment. I thought maybe this was the beginning of something, maybe a fragile kind of healing. But healing was never something my mother wanted. 6 weeks later, my grandfather passed away. March 30th, 2019. Kidney failure. Hospice. Peaceful, they said. I wasn't there when he took his last breath, but I still remember the call. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I sat in my car and cried until I couldn't breathe, and then my phone started buzzing. One text, then another, then 10 more. You need to go on Facebook. What the hell did your mom just post? Are you okay? I remember thinking, what could she possibly say this time? But I wasn't prepared for what I saw. She had written, publicly, for everyone to see, that I had murdered my grandfather. She said the care facility I'd put him in had killed him, that I had abandoned him, that I'd been too busy to care. There was, in black and white, my own mother accusing me of killing the man who raised me. People I hadn't talked to in years were commenting, arguing, asking questions. My phone blew up with messages from relatives, old classmates, co-workers, and I just sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. My grief turned to something colder, disbelief, then anger. I wanted to call her, to scream, to ask why, but I didn't, because deep down I already knew. My mother couldn't handle guilt, so she gave it away. She couldn't face what she'd done, the years of silence, the missed chances, the absence. So she built a story where I was a villain. It was easier for her to hate me than to hate herself. That night, I deleted Facebook. I couldn't look at it anymore. The comments, the whispers, the people choosing sides in a war I never wanted to fight. I didn't go to her after that. Didn't answer her calls. Didn't reply when she tried to explain. There's no explanation for that kind of betrayal. When my grandfather's funeral came, I went alone. She wasn't there. She said she couldn't face the family. But I knew what that meant. She couldn't face the truth. I stood at his grave, and for the first time I felt something strange, peace, maybe, because I knew I had done right by him. I had been there. I had given him what he asked for, one last look at the daughter he'd missed. And even if it ended badly, at least he got that moment. At least he knew he was loved. Grief is supposed to hurt, but betrayal poisons it. It turns love into something that burns on the way down. For a long time, I carried that bitterness everywhere. I stopped trusting people, stopped believing family meant anything. If your own mother could turn on you like that, what hope was there for anyone else? But time changes things, not by healing them, but by making you see them differently. Now, years later, I don't hate her. I pity her. I see her for what she is, a broken woman, terrified of her own reflection. I've learned to accept that sometimes being the bigger person doesn't mean forgiving someone. It means living well without them. My grandmother still keeps a photo of my mother on her wall. I don't ask her to take it down. Maybe she needs that hope, the same hope my grandfather had before he died. I visit the cemetery every March 30th. I bring flowers. I tell him about my life, about how things turn out okay. And before I leave, I always whisper the same words, not out of bitterness, but out of peace. I know the truth, Grandpa, and I think you do too. Then I walk away. Because sometimes the only way to survive a lie that big is to stop trying to prove it wrong and start living like it never touched you at all.